Welcome to this edition of Morgan You Asked For podcast, 9 o'clock here, Central Time Zone on the 13th of November. Just a few things, kind of housekeeping things here. Obviously just thank you to those of you that do watch and comment and listen, do everything. And we just ask you to rate, review, subscribe to your favorite podcast player, to the YouTube page, to the Facebook page, Instagram, all the different things that we do on here. Trying to do a little bit more. Like Trevor was at the Rose Bowl last week. We put a picture of him up there. I went to the Iowa State game on Monday. We'll touch on that. And just trying to get some pictures up there. And it's fun to do. Just subscribe and share and try to have your family and friends to subscribe and listen and like our stuff as well. It does help out, and we do appreciate that. Trev, how's it going out in Colorado? And you had a good trip to California, except for the game. And Iowa State had the same problems. The game wasn't good. I'm glad I ended up not going to Kansas City because it was just a disaster, and we'll get to that later. But first, how was your trip to the Rose Bowl?
Oh, the trip was good. The game was fun for about the first 10 minutes, of course, and it was kind of downhill from there. The Rose Bowl, it's a cool spot. Tailgating there is pretty cool. I didn't get too crazy or anything, but walked around a little bit before the game. And the start of the game, there was definitely more Iowa fans. By the time the second quarter got going, the stadium was pretty much filled up to capacity of where it was going to be. They had the end zones blocked off just because you're not going to get over 100,000 fans there on a Friday night for a regular season game. But it was probably 50-50 at that point. And now, like I said, for about 10 minutes, the game was fun, and then Iowa just got bullied around. And that's the second time that's really happened this year with teams that are either on their level or that they typically are better at, with Michigan State and UCLA. So it's still cool to go to the Rose Bowl, but I'm 0 for 2 there now in my career.
How much different? I mean, obviously the time was different, so it was already dark when the game started. Obviously when you're playing in the Rose Bowl game at the Rose Bowl, it's just a different setting. You've got two really good teams that were at that time in 2015 were almost in the playoff, just missed it. Some of the best players in Iowa history, some of the, maybe the best player in Stanford history with McCaffrey. How much different was everything on Friday night compared to that?
It was a lot less people, of course. I mean, tailgating lots were pretty wide open. When we went there in 2015, it was packed full, fans of both teams. So you can tell Southern California there, LA, tailgating, it's just a different vibe than it is in Iowa because there's a lot more to do in California. So the vibe was still good. Like I said, it was still fun to walk around the Rose Bowl. The one thing that they do have going is they've got super wide walkways around the stadium. So that kind of helps with the crowd, especially when there was only, I don't know how many people were there on Friday night. I never heard if they did announce it at the game. I don't know if they did on the TV broadcast or not, but call it 50 or 60,000. I mean, it's pretty easy to walk around the stadium. I did a couple laps. I actually bought the cheapest ticket I could find, and then I sat on the Iowa side, the UCLA side, and I sat in both end zones because they did have partial sections of the end zones open. So I kind of like to do that now. Buy a cheap ticket if you can, move around, and if somebody comes and wants their seat, you just get up and move to another spot.
Yeah, it's good to get different perspectives, and again, it's not a place that you always get to. It's not your stadium that like the back of your hand or anything. So, I'm glad you had fun. Games, like you said, game started off really well, up 10-0, and then it went downhill from there. Some things weren't so surprising. UCLA's run defense is really good, so Caleb Johnson struggling wasn't a surprise. As much as he did struggle, was a surprise, I think. But he wasn't going to go have 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. I don't think anybody expected that because they're really good on defense, run defense. Brendan Sullivan getting knocked around and then eventually out of the game did not help the cause because he needed to be able to throw the ball to win that football game. And then I think Jackson Stratton, I think is his name, came in, looked pretty good. And the funniest thing I've heard listening to sports talk and everything since is all the fans wanted, every time it looked like Kirk Ferentz was talking to him or a coach was saying something, all the fans were like, no, don't talk to him because he was doing well. And then most quarterbacks have started out really well, but as soon as they get coached up by the Iowa coaches, they're out. So it's like Kirk Ferentz, I think maybe early in the week or something, had said something about not really even knowing who the guy is because he was playing linebacker on scout team or something. They don't want the coaches to touch the quarterback because they get worse. That was kind of funny to listen to.
Yeah, so Sullivan having those turnovers really put us in a tough hole. And, only at Iowa can you go from Cade McNamara, you think the season's over, to Brandon Sullivan, where you have two really good games, and then all of a sudden you've got a linebacker playing quarterback. Only at Iowa could you get that. So I would hope Sullivan's going to play the rest of the year. I guess I haven't heard. I
don't know if he is.
If he's healthy, I don't know if he is either. But if he is healthy, I want him to start. Just because, he can come back next year. But, yeah, it was fun for about 10 minutes. But, again, Iowa getting bullied around on both sides of the ball. That's twice this year. And it just – I don't know. It's been a weird season for Iowa, one of the weirder ones I can remember.
And they played really, really good at home. And, even in the loss to Iowa State, they didn't play great in the second half. And there's some questionable calls there. But they didn't play horrible, but they played really bad on the road for the most part. And that's the surprising part, how different they look at home on the road.
Yeah, this was a game you and I both had circled before the season. We both chalked this one up to an L when we did our preseason predictions. So Friday night out west, we've seen all the records on teams that have to travel, the Big Ten teams especially, what their record is. It's not very good when they have long travels. So that part wasn't as surprising, but to see Iowa get bullied around, again, if they were playing Ohio State or something, that's a little bit different because the talent level, there's such a big gap. But when it's UCLA and Michigan State, when you get bullied around like that, it is a little bit eye-opening. And I felt like we've talked about this for a few years, but it almost felt like the official beginning of the end of the Ferentz era. And listen, he could come back and coach 2, 3, 4 more years, and he could have another 9 or 10 season win in there in those years, but this one felt different to me. Maybe it's just because I was there, though.
You're not the only one to say that, and I remember this. I wasn't following it great. I just started at Iowa State and everything, but Trent Condon, who's on KXNO, brought this up at the end of the Fry era. 96, I think they had a pretty good year with Tim Dwight, Tavian Banks. And then 97, most of those guys all came back. And they just had an okay year. I think they ended 7-5, something like that. Much like this year. Not as good as they should have been, but it was really – it wasn't bad. Still a bowl game. Not what they should have been, but not too bad. And then one more year – I think they went like 3-9. Iowa State finally beat them. And that's not a situation now because they don't have a 15-game winning streak like they had at that time. But I think they went like 3-9, and then it was Hayden Fry's last year, and the cupboard was bare. There was nothing left. Ferentz came in, went like 2-29 in his first 30, 31 games, something like that, and then turned it around. But it took him a couple years just because the cupboard was so bare. And he was starting to relate that, last year really good, but there was some fluky stuff, maybe a little smoke and mirrors. This year, a little bit more back to reality, a couple bounces here, there, but not as good a year as they wanted. Next year, looking at all the 6-year seniors and 5th-year seniors, and you're not getting that bonus COVID year anymore after this year, I don't believe. I think this is the end of it. Who is going to come back next year? You got to recruit, you got transfer portal, everything. So it's easier to change up your team compared to like 98. But next year could be a struggle. And then, does Ferentz retire then? And you got to get a new coach, and it's history repeating itself 25 years later. And that was I hadn't thought of it in that situation, but potentially Trent Condon there is not incorrect.
Yeah, it's on the board. And, we talked about this a couple times when we're talking about the top teams in the country, how I don't necessarily think there was a great team this year compared to some others because of the NIL and the transfer portal. So that doesn't just go for the top teams. That goes for every team in the country. So I was going to lose guys or maybe have a tough time getting them in. If you don't bring the right ones, next year could be another disappointing season. So it's on the board. And yeah, I don't know. Iowa's a top 25 program of the last 25 years without question because of Kirk Ferentz. But it feels like the ceiling's been hit for a couple of years now. And you almost wonder if the ceiling is going to start to lower a little bit.
Yeah, it's very questionable. And Hawk fans are a fickle bunch. And 1 week they're high as a kite, and they think you got the new quarterback. He's going to lead you the end of this year, get better, win out, go win a bowl game, and then lead them into next year and ready to go. And now this year it's fire everybody. And I think this is my prediction. This Saturday they don't play, have a bye. November 23rd, when they trot onto the field as an offense, Cade McNamara will be the quarterback. That is my call right now. I think Brendan Sullivan's pretty hurt. I wouldn't be shocked if he has a concussion. I know they're looking at his ankle as well. They said McNamara was lifting again and felt good. Obviously it's not guaranteed that he's healthy yet either. Concussions are funny because you might feel good for 3 days, but then all of a sudden your headache comes back and then you're out again. You kind of have to start that process over. So quarterback very much in doubt, but if I had to put money on it right now, I would say Cade McNamara starts at Maryland. And I don't think that is a good feeling for Hawkeye fans.
No, it's not. I mean, if Sullivan can play, I want him to because he can come back next year. At this point, I'm not even really worried if Iowa wins or loses the final two games. I mean, I want him to win the final two. But what's more important to me is Sullivan getting some playing time if he is healthy to build into next year. An 8-4, 7-5 year this season doesn't make a lot of difference to me. In years past, it would. 8-4, I always say is kind of the bar. At least get to 8-4, if not better. But I would be willing. If somebody told me Cade can start the last two and you go 2-0, or Sullivan can start the last two and you go 1-1, I want to start Sullivan just to build on what could potentially happen next year for the team.
Yeah, for the best of the program going forward, Sullivan needs to play. Doesn't matter what the record is. That might not be the best for this team right now, but for the program, you have to see what you have with Brendan Sullivan.
Yeah, I'd like to see him play if he can. But, if it's close and if the team does feel Cade gives us the best chance to win, Ferentz he's going to try to do everything he can, especially for the seniors, to try to win the last two and go to a better bowl game. Kirk's always been big about that. Seniors getting playing time, doing right by them. So it'll be a balance. But, nothing against Cade. I'd like to see Sullivan in there to, like I said, build a little bit up for next year, and hopefully we could have some hope at quarterback next year, even if it doesn't turn out well.
Yeah. Anything else really with the Hawkeyes? I don't have a lot. They're starting to get some injuries as well. It's that time of year. Speaking of injuries, we're going to transition into Iowa State here. And we talked about, and everybody's talked about, the better starts. We've given up a touchdown to start the game 4 straight games. Well, we'll go down to Arrowhead. We get a stop. They punt it. They have a great punt. Go down it on the 1 yard line. Iowa State goes 99 yards, up 7-0. Well, then they go 70 yards on a play and ties it up, and then holy hell happens. 6 straight scoring drives, and then essentially all in the second quarter, maybe start of the third, doesn't really matter. And then Iowa State catches up and actually kind of makes it a game, and there was a pick 6. We were just trying to do too much. That essentially ended up only losing by 9. But the game wasn't that close. And I truly believe that the injuries are starting to catch up. It was Band-Aid. It was duct tape. It was just held on by strings. somebody was making a play and they were able to win some games during the year. Finally, the injuries are coming back. The talent's just not on the field because some of those receivers for Kansas were running as wide open as you'll ever see. We blitzed off the corner, and the safety did not cover him. I mean, that somebody ran the wrong play. Whether the corner wasn't supposed to blitz or the safety didn't cover, doesn't matter. But they left a guy wide open, and it's just pitch and catch. And then we have a touchdown where we run a great play, and our quarterback misses it. That was really the end of the game. We had a chance there. I mean, think about that. We ended up losing by 9. Now we only, change 3 for 4, and now you're only down 5. Well, you may not throw that pick 6 because you're only down 1 score instead of 2. Every play is like that. Every score is like that in the game. Offensive line, we need to get people healthy. D-line, all kinds of people hurt now. Linebackers have been hurt all year. Now the D-backs are starting to get hurt. And it's just, the season's on the brink. Favored by 8.5 or so against Cincinnati. I really don't understand that. I don't know if we should be favored by anything over anybody right now. And Cyclone Fanatic and Iowa Everywhere people, and this is a fair question. I'm going to ask you this question as well. On defense, we play that 3-3 dime stack, and we get no pressure, and we just cover on the back end, and our D-backs and everything in the last 5 years have been good enough to not let people run open and then make plays and get turnovers. Well, right now we can't do that. Teams are running for almost 5 yards a game, 5 yards a carry on us. If you know that all these people that are hurt are not coming back, which that's a whole nother argument, but Matt Campbell straight up lies to everybody's face on injuries. Everybody's close, and we dodged a bullet. Well, the guy's walking on crutches with a full knee brace. He ain't coming back. Trevor Downing from Creston several years ago, he was week to week the entire season. He broke his leg. He wasn't coming back. I mean, it was the worst kept secret in the world, but every week he was week to week or day to day. Now, some of them might be able to come back pretty soon. I mean, that's just the reality. We don't know their injuries, but if you know all these guys aren't coming back, do you need to change the scheme, or do you just go down with the ship?
It's a tough one. They've been running 3-3-5 all year, obviously. I noticed in the Texas Tech game that they lost there on that final drive. The 3 linebackers were just kind of standing around and weren't really having much of an impact on that drive. And I would have liked to at least see them blitz or something, maybe put another D lineman on the line there to rush the passer. But
that's the argument is you go 3-3-5, which they've been doing, take a linebacker out and go 4-2-5 and put a more of a D lineman in there. That's the argument. You get one inexperienced linebacker out and maybe you get a little more pressure because you're not getting any pressure with 3. I mean, and Jalen Daniels just had all days to throw, and I don't care who you are. If you give a quarterback that's good enough and he's better than most, 10 seconds, it's the same argument we had with the Bears and the Hail Mary. Well, you give Jaden Daniels 13 seconds to throw. He's going to get it there, and he's going to give his guy a chance. If you get no pressure on a quarterback, Division I quarterbacks are going to find their guy.
Yeah, especially going back to that Texas Tech game. I would like to see him put another D lineman down, or if you're just going to have the 3 linebackers there, at least blitz one, change it up
every time. Every time.
Yeah, something. I mean, keep the offensive line and the quarterback guessing a little bit. But it seemed like on that drive, from what I remember anyway, they were just kind of standing, almost like playing a little bit of a zone and not moving much, just kind of taking up space. So, yeah, I mean, at this point in the season, I don't really know if you could have switched it up. I didn't really get to see much of the game. I was driving. But, it's the weird thing for Iowa State is, let's say they finished 8-4, 9-3. You probably would have taken that most before the year. Most fans would. But it's the way that it's going to happen, or at least the way it's looking like it's going to happen, to start out 7-0 and then finish whatever they're going to. Now, if they went out And if Colorado can lose and they somehow get to Dallas, and that changes things. But right now, with that 7-0 start, it just it's pretty disappointing to lose 2 in a row now.
Yeah, that Texas Tech game is just gonna, Kansas manhandled us, and Kansas played really good against Kansas State. Kind of blew it. Daniels fumbled. They had a lead in almost every game, so they've just kind of had some bad luck / just bad mojo. But they were ranked in the top 25. They were supposed to contend for the Big 12 title, so the talent was there. It just wasn't working, and maybe it's getting better now. And they're going to have all kinds of say on how this Big 12 championship game happens. They're not going to get there, but they just beat Iowa State. They play BYU this week, and then I think they play Colorado. So they got all kinds of say. Now, I think BYU has a 2-game lead, so they can lose and still get to the Big 12 title game. But if they can beat BYU, then that BYU probably still gets a championship game, but then that all but guarantees the Big 12 is only going to have one team in the playoff. So Kansas is going to have all kinds of say in what happens. Iowa State just needs to win, and a loss for Colorado, and they're in. As tough as it is, as sad as Cyclone fans and mad as they are, as long as you win, the odds are Colorado's going to lose just because – they're not an elite team, and most teams lose a game out of 3. That's just reality of college football when you're not an elite team.
The problem, there's 2 things here. This week, Kansas State and Arizona State play. In my opinion, you want Kansas State to win that game to give Arizona State the 3rd loss, and then you play Kansas State later so you can give them their 3rd loss. But going back to Colorado, if you look at Colorado's schedule, they've got Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. So on paper, that's about as good as a schedule as you could ask for this year to end. But, we'll see. Utah, I'm a little higher on Utah than most people this year. All their games have mostly been close. They've just had the injury at quarterback. They can't finish out. But for Colorado, it's all right there for them on paper. Kansas is playing better, though. That's going to be a tough one if they can get past Utah, though.
Yeah. It's just Colorado is in the same situation Iowa State was a week ago. They control it. You win, you're in. They're not going to be easy. Pressure. Now, the thing that Colorado has that BYU doesn't have, Kansas State doesn't have, Iowa State doesn't have, Arizona State doesn't have, is they have 2 of the top 5 players in college football on their team. That does help a lot. So they have elite players. I don't think they have the best coaching staff. I don't think they have the rest of the best players, but you start drafting teams, they have the top 2 picks of everybody they're going to play.
Yeah, they have that. They've got momentum. Their defensive line's played a lot better. Warren Sapp's been helping with the D-line this year. That's come around. The offensive line is still the biggest weakness, so I'd be interested to see how they hold up the final 3 weeks. But I do agree with you. At this point, the Big 12 is only getting 1 in.
Right. The only chance is BYU's undefeated and gets beat in the championship game. That's the only hope for the Big 12 to get 2 teams in.
Yeah, that's the only hope. And even then, I still don't think they're probably going to do it, because then we'll get into the SEC. But you're going to have one of those SEC teams sitting there with probably a 10-2 record or something that we know the committee is going to want to put in.
Right. Anything else with Iowa State and Iowa? Really nothing else to talk about. Iowa State plays Cincinnati at 7:00 on Saturday night. It's just a dogfight. You got to win. Doesn't matter how, doesn't matter if, doesn't matter how it looks. It doesn't matter. You just have to win. Win by 1, win by 50. I think you do have to go into these games now with the defense the way it is. You have to score 35 points a game. And they did, but they gave up 45 last week. But the 2 weeks prior to that, 2 games prior, not weeks, because there's a bye in there, they only scored like 20, 22, and were able to make it close and then pulled it out against Central Florida. But I think you have to just realize you got to score 35 now.
Yeah, especially with the injuries, they're going to have to put up some points. So, yeah, are you going to the game?
Yeah, yep, we'll be there with it being a night game. We're going to go up Saturday morning. Probably not even really morning, noonish. I mean, since the game's not till 7, then we'll stay all night just because we'll be late. Don't need to get home super late. Yeah, so you're just kind of speaking Iowa State, and I know those of you that do follow the social media and stuff. I did go to the basketball game on Friday, and that was because I took the camper up. We got it winterized and everything, so we can't use a sink or anything anymore, but we can turn the TV on and sleep there and use the heat. It's not really going to be that cold on this Saturday, but just in case we need it or whatever. And so I'm sitting in Ames. I'm driving up to Ames. I'm thinking this at the time. I'm like, I'm going to be in Ames at 6:00 where I can see Hilton Coliseum and there's a basketball game on. My team's ranked number 5 in the country. Why would I not go? So I went and bought, and this is we've had this argument too, bought a $10 ticket, but $20 in fees. So it's so dumb. So like a $30 ticket. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
They'll get you with those fees. For the Iowa game, I use the Game Time app. I've been hearing about that on some podcasts I listen to. So the price that you see is the price you pay. I think there might have been like a $2.99 fee of some kind. Maybe just standard tax. I didn't even look. I just noticed that there was nothing crazy like with Ticketmaster and some of these others. So check out the Game Time app, maybe.
Okay, and I have all mine like SeatGeek, StubHub, whatever. I have it, so it tells me what the price is. But then when you actually check out, it says price of ticket $10, $9.99 for this fee, $4.99 for this. So when I buy the ticket, I know what the price is because I have that clicked. But then when you actually see it broke down, it just makes you sick.
Yeah, it just seems silly. But no, that's good. You went to the game, and yeah, that's things are weird for Iowa State. But getting into the bigger picture of college football, you probably saw the new ranking show, the matchups. I think the matchups for this one look a lot better if that's the way it was to finish.
What is it? Notre Dame going to – no. Who was going to Penn State?
Ole Miss. Ole Miss was going to Penn State, right. And then Alabama was going to Indiana. So I think most everybody agrees.
Awesome.
We don't want to see Big Ten versus Big Ten or SEC versus SEC in the first round if we can help it. Now, after that, Big Ten teams and SEC teams are going to play each other just by default because they're probably going to get 8 teams in. But for that opening round, I think it'd be good to have Big Ten versus SEC or other conferences just because leading up to it, it'll, everyone will be bragging about the Big Ten or the SEC who's better. And then they'll have the bragging rights after, until the next games are played. But I think most of the country would agree we don't want to see an SEC versus SEC team if we can help it. Whether that's right or wrong, but as a viewer, that's what we want.
Do you think that the committee will manipulate it, not necessarily change the teams that are in, but will they manipulate it one up or down to try to do that? Or will they just try to get a best game? If they can get Alabama versus Texas, they want it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the matches, but if you can, I think most of the country would like to see Big Ten versus SEC.
How cool would it be to see Alabama at Indiana? I mean, Indiana Stadium is not huge. It's not 100,000 people. Obviously, Penn State is. They would want it to be a night game. It would be a whiteout. But Alabama traveling to Indiana would be awesome.
Yeah, I want those. Most people do want those Southern schools to come up north if they have to. Now, if Alabama or someone gets to host a game, then that's different. That is what it is. But these Big Ten teams, if they get some of the top seeds and it holds out, I want to see teams from the South have to go up there.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be awesome to see Alabama have to go to Ohio State, if that situation arises. So the poll is what it is. We're talking about this before. I kind of want this discussion. The argument is, do you want the best 12 teams in or the 12 most deserving? I think most people want the best 12 teams. But if you do the 12 best teams, according to Vegas, on paper, the recruiting rankings, that eliminates so many teams. I'm going to use Iowa State as an example. If you were going to go the best 12 teams, Iowa State could have went 12-0 this year, won the Big 12, been 13-0. And I still don't think, according to Vegas, they would be a top 12 team. If they went, if Alabama came up to Iowa State for that first round of playoffs, I do think Alabama would still be favored. And it doesn't matter if Alabama lost 3 games. And then kind of the opposite side, where I think I agree the best 12 should be in. I do think it needs to be the 12 most deserving because the games have to matter. You still have to win games. And our friend of the program, and he's been on here a lot, Zach and I had great discussions on Sunday about this. They still have to beat teams, They went and lost to Vanderbilt. Notre Dame were 27.5-point underdog or favorites to Northern Illinois, and they lost. That has to penalize them. Losing has to penalize teams. Yes, Vanderbilt isn't the worst team in America like they've been, but they're still not better than – they're still worse than Kansas State. They're worse than Colorado. It's not good. BYU has two wins against top 25 teams in that poll. Texas has 0 wins against that poll. Now, it's not all their fault, but it is what it is. And Texas is ranked number 3 in the country because they're Texas. It's brand in recruiting rankings.
Yeah, the brands, and we know they're going to favor SEC and Big Ten teams. They're going to want to get as many in there as they can. The one thing I did like to see, I don't know if it's right or not, but at least they are willing to consider, Georgia was the first team out. So Georgia does have that win on the road at Texas, which that should matter. Right.
Yeah.
But, that's a big game this week, Tennessee and Georgia. If Georgia loses that game, that might be all she wrote for Georgia, even if they were to win out after that. So this is Georgia season's on the line.
And I understand, I get the argument, and I made this argument. Everybody was mad that Florida State didn't get in last year. Georgia didn't get in, and their only loss was to Alabama. And if you put them in a 4-team playoff last year, they might have been favored to win the thing. Yeah, I understand they lost, but if you truly put them in and you put them up against Washington first, they probably would have been favored. Now, you still have to play the game. You have to beat them. But would it have shocked anybody to see Georgia win the national title last year if they would have got in? Absolutely not. And this is the argument. Even if Georgia loses to Tennessee this week, and then they don't even get in the SEC championship game, which is fine, whatever, is Georgia one of the top 12 teams in the country? And if you put them, even if you don't think they are, if you put them in the bracket and you let them play that game, are they going to win a game or two? Or would it shock you? Absolutely not. But you still have to win games. And I understand the teams they've lost to are Alabama and Ole Miss, both teams in the playoff right now. And Iowa State doesn't have, teams like Iowa State or BYU don't have teams that aren't playing in the playoff. But that's not their fault either right now. Give them a couple years. They need to get the ability to go schedule a couple of these games. Then the other thing is, and this is the SEC, there's a chance that 8 teams could tie for the championship at 10-2 because there's no divisions now. And the thing is, those teams are cheating like none other because they only play 8 conference games. You have a 16-team league, and you only play half the teams in your league. So it is truly a crapshoot on who you play. They need to play 9 games.
The SEC has to get to 9 games. There's no question about that. I'm sure the Big Ten and the SEC, when they met earlier this year, I'm sure they brought that up, and that's something you and I have talked about. They've got to play 9 because that would eliminate some of these teams all being 10-2 potentially.
Yeah, Alabama's playing Marist or Mercer or something this week.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, it's ridiculous. So essentially, they're getting a bye without a bye. Now, like Iowa has a bye, and that's fine, but they're getting a bye. If Ryan Williams is dinged up or Jalen Milroe is dinged up, you play him for a quarter, you get out 35-0, and then you sit him. Or, you probably don't not play him because you don't want to show that to anybody, but you play him the first quarter, you get up 35-0, and then you sit him, and it's no worse for the wear.
Yeah, it's about as easy as a game as you can schedule there for Alabama. And I was just looking some of the other SEC schools. They've got some easy ones coming up too with different small programs. So, yeah, they've got to play 9 games. I think what's going to happen here eventually, though, is we're going to see the TV ratings and all the money that come in from this 12-team playoff. It's going to expand even further.
Yep.
I don't know what number they're going to go to exactly, but it's not going to stay at 12. There's too much money in this now.
Right. Yeah, it's going to go bigger, and they're going to want. And there's going to be it's going to be a negotiation. The SEC and the Big Ten are say we want 4 each, and there's not a whole lot that the ACC and Big 12 can say right now. But they're going to come back and say, okay, you can have 4, but then we go to 16 or 24, and then okay, you can have your 4, but then now, realistically, if it goes to 16 or 24, now you're going to get 6 or 7 of each, but that way. You can kind of appease both teams, both sides, both conferences. All the conferences is, yeah, you can get 6, but at least that gives the ACC and Big 12, hey, we could get 2 or 3 on a certain year. Maybe not every year, but if Iowa State wouldn't have messed up and had, if you get a couple teams with 1 loss or maybe 1 undefeated and 1 with 2 losses, and you get a 11-2 Big 12 team that lost a championship game. They should get in on a 16 or 2014 playoff without any arguments.
Yeah, when it does go to 16 or 24, that's going to happen, and also it's going to create more of these opening round matchups that we're so excited for. Teams going on the road to teams they hardly ever play, or when they do play, it's only in bowl games in destination cities. Now they're going to have to go on the road to, all the different little college towns all across the United States. So it's going to expand. And this year, with it being 12, I don't think right now I'm going to feel too bad for most teams that get left out. Now we'll see how the season finishes up. If we have all these 10-2 SEC teams, then it's like, okay, who's getting in, who's not. That could be a different story, but that's kind of their own fault though for only playing 8 conference games.
The problem with that is, if let's just right now, I think there's a possibility that 8 teams could finish at 10-2. Let's just say 6 of them do. The 2 teams that have to go to the Big 12 or the SEC championship, and then the actual team that loses, they're going to get left out. And it's going to end up being a coin flip, or because you beat this team, it's going to be tiebreaker issues because they all didn't play each other. It's not round robin. If you ask now, here is something that the Big 12 could have a chance. The only thing I could think of that has a chance, and I wish they wouldn't have lost to Nebraska, but if Colorado would win out and lose in the Big 12 title game, is there any chance that the TV steps in and say, hey, we can get Deion on TV, big time situation? Because it would be big ratings because everybody likes to watch Deion.
Oh, I think without question, if in that scenario, they would push for Colorado to be in. Yeah, Colorado is a massive draw right now with Deion and this current staff and the players. So, yeah, I think without question, if that scenario would have played out, then yes, they would have pushed for Colorado to get it to be in.
I don't think they can push hard enough if they have 3 losses. If they get to the Big 12 title game and win, obviously they're in. But and the TV execs will be jumping up and down, and then they'll sit around and figure out if they want to let BYU in. But the TV people will love it if somehow Colorado gets in.
Oh, yeah, they're rooting for them over BYU. The TV people are to get in. So, yeah, if Colorado can get it done, that would be interesting. And then to see, obviously, what seed they would get and all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, if Colorado beats BYU and BYU's undefeated and that's their only loss, I still think my prediction right now is they'd leave BYU out.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I would still say the Big 12 only gets 1 in. especially with all this craziness with the SEC. You know they're going to push for those schools to get in.
See, and yeah, I mean, I agree. The SEC is the sleeping giant right here. If you look at the poll right now, the Big Ten has a big step up. But you got to think Ohio State and Indiana have to play each other. So one of those teams is going to have another loss or a first loss if you're Indiana, if you can get there. I think it's in 2. I don't think it's this Saturday. I think it's next Saturday.
Yep.
And if Ohio State would run Indiana out of the building, Indiana drops like a rock because they are like an Iowa State. They're like a BYU. They'll put them in and they're fine. But as soon as you lose and now you're right back to out, you're going to put that 2 or 3 loss Alabama, Georgia in over Indiana, even though Indiana's in the Big Ten. Doesn't matter. It comes back to brands. Indiana's going to get the same treatment that Iowa State or BYU or Kansas State gets, unless they're undefeated. But even if they are undefeated, if that jersey, if they had the same schedule, same record, we talked about this last week, and it had the M on it, and they wore the winged helmets, they would be number 2, maybe number 1 in the country.
Yeah, if they lose to Ohio State, which most people think they're going to, it's the fashion in how they lose it. If they keep it close throughout the game,
if it's close,
they won't get dinged. They won't get dinged as much. But if they get blown out 52-3 or something, they're going to drop, like you said. They're going to drop hard. The only thing that they have going for them is Kurt Sinetti. He's a character. Mm-hmm. So, would that help with the ratings and the TV? I don't know if that would make much of a difference. If they'd want to keep them up a couple spots just because of that. But how they play versus Ohio State is going to be really important. They don't have to win the game.
Nope,
they just can't get run out of the stadium.
Right. If they lose 30-26 or 24, they're fine. They're in the playoff because that's where they do get the benefit of the doubt because they're in the Big Ten. They'll put them in over. That would be the argument. Do you put? I mean, I think you're talking about Indiana and BYU in that situation, and BYU would lose the Big 12 title game. Those are the type of teams you're looking at, and then I think Indiana would get in over BYU because they're in the Big Ten, even though their schedule is not good. I mean, obviously they have to play Ohio State.
That'd be my guess. So
they dodged everybody else.
We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's what's frustrating but kind of fun. Most of the time, it plays itself out. And I did listen to this, that if the BCS was still in place, somebody ran the scenario in BCS, the rankings are really, really close. Everybody's like, well, they're moving and manipulating people and stuff like that. And if they really went to the computers, it's really not that far off. They move a team here or there.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, really. It wouldn't have to be that drastic. I mean, the computers and people obviously think different, but that doesn't surprise me that it would be pretty much similar, maybe.
You got to think that committee is using computers and analytics. You have to. A little bit. You have to. And they're looking at Vegas power rankings. I don't care what you say. They're not betting on the teams, but Vegas ranks teams and puts a power ranking together because they want what's best. They're trying to make money. And they have no bias. They don't care. They truly don't care who wins. They just want to make money. And that's why those power rankings are usually so close and those spreads are so close. And they get it right 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, those tall, like people say, those tall buildings in Vegas, they weren't magically built on. They're built by people like you and me, betting on spreads. Yeah. I don't bet on spreads anymore.
Well, they actually aren't. They're actually built on slot machines because actually, if you look at sports betting is a very small chunk of their pie. I'm pretty sure.
It is. No, slots are definitely the biggest, but Vegas usually they, like you said, they leave their biases out of it. Where the committee obviously has some biases because it's, you've got former people that went to certain universities or certain conferences, all that type of stuff. So there are biases in there, but I think it's exciting. It creates for, a lot of controversy, but the fact that they went to 12 is a step in the right direction, though, at least.
Yeah, because you're talking about a whole lot more teams. If you're still at 4, Alabama's out, Georgia's out. Tennessee's probably out with Hail Mary to get back in. The Georgia-Tennessee game for sure is a lose you're out. If it's 4, no questions asked. If it's 4, it's interesting because then you are having the real arguments on Indiana and BYU being undefeated and being 5 and 6, and you got So what it's Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3. Who's 4?
Who is 4? Was it Penn State 4?
Maybe.
I think the Big Ten had 4 in the top 5 or something, or 3 of them, or whatever. Yeah.
4 of the 5 because Indiana was 5.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's right. I did, last week I had it pulled up.
And BYU was 6. Now that's not the seeds in the tournament, but that's the actual rankings because the seeds are different than the rankings, and that throws people off a little bit too. BYU was ranked 6, but they were the 3rd seed. Texas was the 3rd ranked team, but they were the 5 seed. It's kind of weird like that.
Yeah, that when you're watching that show, you gotta know what's going on there because they're going to go down the AP top 20 or the top 25 rankings, and then the seeds are going to be a little bit different. So that does throw some people off when they're watching it for the first time.
All right. Anything else in college? College football, college basketball started. I kind of talked about earlier that Iowa State was there. I was there at that game. Here's the thing that I saw with Iowa State, why they're better than they've been and why they're so good. Kansas City, on paper, is supposed to win their league and be pretty good. And I was watching the game, and I didn't think Iowa State played very well. And especially in the first half, they didn't look very good. And they were up 15. And then they won by almost 30. They had a little stretch there where they made 3 or 4 threes in a row, and they put it out of reach. But when you don't play well and you just kind of are going through the motions, it looks like, and some things work, some things don't, and the game's really never in doubt, that's when you know you're pretty freaking good. And they are really, really big. That's the difference. The big guys they have now are talented. They actually look like they know what they're doing on the offensive end. They run plays through the post. And so this team probably going to have more losses than they had last year. But I think this team fundamentally and just the way the team is constructed is built to go a little farther than the last couple. Even though, 2 of the last 3 went to the Sweet 16, I think this team has a chance to go farther because 1 through 10, they're better. And they have a post presence that can actually score. And
yeah, that was kind of their fault last year, wasn't it? They couldn't score very much. And I think you said earlier in the year when we talked maybe in the summer, you thought this team would be a better offensive team.
Yeah, because they put the big 6'11", 260-pound guy at the free throw line, and he pump faked and went right around his guy and got a layup, and that just – Robert Jones did a lot of great things, but that's not what he did or what he could do. He just didn't have that skill.
How far away are we from Iowa State basketball, the men's game?
I think it's the week of December 10th. December 4th. We need to mark that date down. Pretty sure that's a Wednesday, so we'll probably be doing the podcast, or we'll have to see what time the Iowa State game is. We might have to do the podcast on a Tuesday or whatever there. We'll just see what happens. But December 4th is a week or a night that has unbelievable basketball games. Iowa State plays Marquette. There's like 4 or 5 matchups of top 25 teams. Now, some of these, by the time you get to December 4th, the rankings are going to change a lot because over the Thanksgiving week are a lot of those big tournaments. Like Iowa State plays Auburn the Monday of Thanksgiving. So obviously if you win or lose, Iowa State could go out there and go 0-3 and drop, but they might lose to Auburn, North Carolina, and UConn. I mean, that might be their 3 losses. Well, that's pretty freaking good. But you're all of a sudden going to drop to number 24. I don't think they'd go out 0-3 out there. They're better than that. But it's one heck. And then, so that's Maui, and then there's other ones. So teams are going to lose. And then the other thing, I think it was last night, was the Champions Classic, Kansas, Michigan State, Duke, and Kentucky all played. And I understand why they're in it, but Michigan State needs to stop getting invited to that stuff. They've been the champion. They deserve to be in it for 15 years, maybe 20 years, but they aren't that team anymore. They're not even ranked. They've not been as good the last few years. You need to get UConn in that game now. UConn's the bluest of blue blood since 2000. They're better than everybody else. They're better than Duke. They're better than Kansas. They're better than North Carolina. Since 2000, they have like 5 championships.
Yeah, we talked about that after they won this past year, earlier in the year. They have like more championships than anybody right now since like you said about that 2000 season. So yeah, UConn is a blue blood. Obviously they're going to be good in the women's side too with Paige Beckers at UConn. So men's and women's, I mean, not that they've always been pretty good, obviously, but that kind of transitions to the women's side. I watched the Iowa women before we got on.
Yep.
They look good. Sydney came back looking well. They had 11 girls score. A lot of freshmen played. I think a lot of freshmen are going to play this year, but some that did look pretty good. McCabe looks like she's going to sort of take over for the Gabby Marshall role, but she looks more comfortable with the basketball, moving around with it than Gabby did. So she was hustling around. The team looks pretty solid. I think they're going to be – I almost wonder if they should have been ranked coming into the season, but I get sort of why they're not. But I definitely do think they are a tournament team. Can they win a game or two in the tournament or maybe get to like a Sweet 16? Going to have to see them play some better competition. But they did say the 24 class had 4 top 100 players. The 25 class has 3 top 100 players. So the next 5 years or 5 or 6 years should, on paper, be pretty good for the Iowa women.
Yeah, it's one of those they just need to capitalize on Caitlin Clark's, celebrity. They got to the national championship game 2 years in a row, had the best player in basketball. Surely they got into living rooms to recruit players they probably never had before that. And hopefully the coaches can get a few of those kids. You always wonder when you get in those rooms and, you're down to the last 3 teams, and it's Iowa, it's UConn, it's Maryland. Maryland's been pretty good. They're not as good. It's Iowa, UConn, and LSU. And you keep and unfortunately you lose 3 or 4 of those. Well, now you're not recruiting that kid that you did for the last 25 years, that 3-star out of small town Iowa or small town Minnesota that come into the program, maybe not be a fixture and all conference player as a freshman, but in 2 or 3 years they're going to be there. Now, some of it is basketball's changed, transfer portal, NIL. You can't depend on someone being there for more than a year. It's a year-to-year basis because if you don't play them enough or they think they can get a better deal somewhere, they're leaving. Doesn't matter. It's not a reflection on the player. It's not a reflection on the coach. It's just reality of today's college world. Which, speaking of that, I want to wish Mark Farley the best, football coach at UNI, retiring after 24 years. And he was talking about that. Just college sports has changed, and he's worried about it. Now, he's 60-some years old. He's not winning. But what he said was 100% right. He was right on the same lines as Nick Saban. I think everybody remembers what Nick Saban said is he knew it was time to go when Miss Terry, I think they had recruits over and mom or dad or somebody, all they asked about was how much money he's going to get. And they realized they were out at that time. Mark Farley's that way too. And a guy like David Johnson or Kurt Warner, those type of players, more David Johnson that was a really good player, beat Iowa State. That player, after a year or two, there's no way they stay at UNI now. It's just reality. Iowa's going to come in, Iowa State's going to come in, or anybody else. a guy on Iowa State's team right now, Nate Heisey, played at UNI for 4 years. Now he's playing at Iowa State. AJ Green, he ended up going into the draft because he got an assurance and playing for the Bucks two-way, but he was going to come to Iowa State. Now, some of that situation, his dad's a coach there now, left UNI to coach at Iowa State, but he was going to leave for his last year to play. It's just tough. You have to recruit your whole – and I think basketball is worse than football. And it's helped Iowa State. Iowa State's went 1-22, 0 in the conference, and then the next year goes Sweet 16 with a new coach. So it's good and bad. But teams like UNI, coaches like Mark Farley, Jay Wright, Tony Bennett, Coach K, Coach Saban, you can go down the list. They don't want to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, it's going to be a younger coach's probably generation moving forward. And again, we've talked about before that this stuff will all correct itself here eventually. Right now, it's the Wild West. It'll come back to the middle. We've talked about college programs are hiring former in football NFL GMs and capologists to come in and start managing whatever the NIL is, whatever the funds are. You spoke about Iowa State. They have an understanding, all colleges do now, of what certain players of certain positions are worth. And then there'll be a correction back to the middle. It's just like in the 2000 or 2020 or 2021 when everybody was scared to say anything and everybody's getting canceled and all this other stuff. Yep. And now people are just like, yeah, that's not the way the real world works. So it's come back to the middle now, thankfully. And in college sports, it'll come back to the middle some. It won't be like this forever.
Yeah. And now I do think Iowa football may be in a little trouble with money on NIL. And overall, they got plenty of donors. There's plenty of money there, but they've just been burned. They're paying McNamara $750,000, $600,000. You don't know officially, but that's the word on the street. And he's not been good enough for that. You paid Caden Proctor. Now, he didn't get all his money, but you were paying him. He took some money for the month he was here. Those are the situations that some people just aren't going to give anymore. And that's just the reality. So you have to hit on more than you lose on when you go for the big fish. And that's what everybody's like, well, Kirk Ferentz is slow and not doing the transfer portal great. Well, McNamara was the number one quarterback in the portal that year. They got him. Proctor was the number one overall in the whole thing last year in the portal. They got him. So they've got the last two big names that they wanted. And I don't know how much you watch, but I watched that Alabama LSU game. Caden Proctor's good. Really, really good. And, I mean, you just look at him. He's so big and can move so well. He would help that Iowa team a lot. But you can't blame him. He goes to Alabama and starts as a freshman. And I think here's what happened there. Coach left. He didn't know what to expect from the new coach. He knew what he was going to get at Iowa because he knew those coaches. They recruited him hard. He probably kind of wanted to go to Iowa, would be my guess. But it's tough to say no to Saban, and you get to go play in championship games and in the playoff. That's hard to say no to, and I respect him for trying to do what's best for his career. Well, Coach retired. He doesn't know. He comes back to Iowa. Well, his Alabama buddies say, hey, it's still pretty good down here. This guy's pretty good. You can do it. You'll like him. And so he changed his mind and went back. I would bet a lot of money that's essentially what happened.
I've heard a couple stories that stuff I can't say on here since this is a PG or PG-13 show, but that's part of it. But I heard there was some other stuff going on, and the coaching staff was like, see ya. So whatever's true or not, whatever's true or not, I don't know, but I'm not going to say it on here on this one, but we could talk about it sometime. But yeah, I mean, I don't blame him for going to Alabama or going back to Alabama. You have a chance to win at a higher level, of course.
Yeah. All right. Done with college here. Let's transition to the NFL. Couple of the notes here. Lions and Chiefs are definitely separating themselves. And looks to me like they're on a collision course. Chiefs just keep finding a way. I was sitting with Zach watching that game, and obviously he's a Broncos fan, and it was painful to watch. I mean, that's you think you have it, and that's the dangerous part about playing for field goals. Instead of just keep going downfield, keep trying to score a touchdown, give it to your best players. And I haven't watched that many replays of that, but that entire left side of the Broncos field goal unit got absolutely destroyed, because if the guy that did block it didn't get it, the guy right behind him was. There was like 3 guys right there. So I don't know if they did something different to get that block, or just they wanted it more and just absolutely blew up those guys. I don't know what happened for sure, but the Chiefs made the play and the Broncos choked it away.
The Chiefs found that weakness in film, and you could see them going after that side most of the game. And then eventually they got it. There was a moment in the game too where the defense was asking Spag, should we let him score so we get the ball back? And he didn't want to let him, because they thought they could get that blocked kick. And everybody's coming out and saying the Chiefs are lucky and all this stuff. Sean Payton even came out and said, yeah, we had a weakness there, and the Chiefs exploited it for us. So, I mean, even the opposing coach was like, nah, it really wasn't lucky. That's what happens when you have a dynasty. And every week I keep hearing how the Chiefs are lucky. Chiefs ain't going anywhere. They're going to be around the next 5 to 10 years. So if you don't like it now, get used to it, because it's not going away.
As long as Andy, we've talked about this, as long as Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are there, they'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to go undefeated this year. They got a big one at Buffalo this week. If they can get past that one, then maybe we could start to talk a little bit. But the Lions game, Jared Goff had one of his worst games of his career, and they still come out and win it. That almost gives me more confidence in them. They shut out the Texans in the second half on the road. That could have been an easy game for them to drop. And I know we talked a couple weeks about playoff teams who really could go to a Super Bowl, who couldn't. I think a team that's starting to emerge is the Chargers. And their defense went from, I think, like 24th or somewhere in scoring defense to number 1 this year. Herbert's only thrown 1 pick. You and I talked about it. Harbaugh's going to have him playing more efficiently. The offensive line and run game's doing well. And then Ladd McConkey's emerging as a rookie. And then their first-round pick last year, Quentin Johnson, the last few weeks has just started to explode. So if they can get a little bit more explosion on the offense to go along with that defense and Harbaugh, I'm not so certain that AFC Championship game may not be Chiefs-Chargers. Now, the Chargers have played a couple, I think 2 or 3 easy opponents in a row. They've got a 4-week stretch coming up. The Chargers do that. We're going to find out a lot about them. I think they've got the Bengals, the Ravens, and 2 more tough games. So we'll find out over the next 4 weeks if Harbaugh's got this Chargers team ready in year 1, or if he maybe needs another draft and another free agency period.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh just wins. They're getting better. You knew he would get Herbert to play better. It was now here's another conspiracy, and we're going to get to the Bears here, which complete. I mean, Eberflus is out. They fired their coordinator. But David Kaplan, who is on the radio there in Chicago, I heard him talking. Jim Harbaugh wanted the Bears job, and the Bears would not give him the time of day, will not hire him because he's not politically correct, or he's just not the type of guy they want. He just wins, and he was absolutely, it's just an incompetent organization. They don't know how to do things. He is a really, really good football coach. Who cares what else he does? You're there to win football games. You're not to be, who cares if he's great on social media? Who cares if he's great in the press room? Who cares if he's the nicest guy in the room? That doesn't matter. Win football games. And then that same Trent Condon asked David Kaplan, is there any chance that the Bears would trade to go get him? And he goes, most of the time that has worked out for the teams that traded for their coach that they wanted. The Buccaneers wanted Gruden from the Raiders, traded for him, won a Super Bowl. Just teams do it. And he's like, absolutely not. This ownership group does not want McMahon. Or not McMahon, Harbaugh. It's getting old Bears quarterbacks mixed up. And that's
well,
sad.
it's really the guy that doesn't want him is Kevin Warren, the old Big Ten commissioner that now is the Bears CEO. He and Harbaugh do not get along. He was the one in 2020 that wanted to shut down Big Ten football, and he and Harbaugh have some bad blood. It's probably more Kevin Warren than it is ownership. The problem is, and I just realized this a couple weeks ago too. I'd forgotten, but the coaching staff and the GM for the Bears, they don't really answer to the owner of the Bears, like a lot of NFL franchises
they answer
too.
to the president.
They answer to Kevin Warren.
Isn't he the president?
He's like he's kind of a mystery man. He's got a lot of different titles there in Chicago, and it's a lot of people are talking about it's not the norm, like a lot of NFL franchises are run. So he has a title, but yet he does a lot of other things that he probably shouldn't. And there's no structure of, the coach, the GM, the owner of the team, or the president.
The
organizational
chart is weird for the Bears.
Yeah. So I'm sure Harbaugh maybe did want to go there, but he and Kevin Warren have some bad blood, and I think he knew what he had, or potentially what he could have with Herbert. So yeah, speaking of your Bears, obviously they let the OC go. There was former Seattle players where he was at before that just didn't like him, and I don't know what's going on. It's probably a combination, like most things. But Eberflus has to be gone after this year. He cannot come back. You asked me after that Hail Mary that they gave up, should they fire the coach? And I said, well, let's let it play out a couple weeks. You don't want to maybe rush to a decision. Well, I think they've gone 23 straight drives without a touchdown and all this other stuff. So it's really bad. And I don't know if it's Caleb Williams. I mean, he seems okay at the press conferences when I hear him speak. I don't hear all of them. Someone did point out that against the Patriots, he was getting sacked a lot, I think 9 times. And there were maybe several incidences where his teammates didn't come help him up. So you wonder, is there something going on in the locker room? Is he not getting called out in the film room when he messes up and everybody else is? I have no idea, but it's the Bears being the Bears probably at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's dysfunction. Eberflus needs to be gone. They need to fire him. They should have fired him the other day too, with the OC and brought in. It doesn't matter who. Williams has not thrown a touchdown pass in over a month. That was a stat I saw today. That's great. It's just bad when you only score 3 points against the Patriots. This is not Bill Belichick Patriots. This is the new Patriots that aren't very good. You had the worst 2 defensive plays in Bears history against the Chargers, and then just didn't play very well against the Cardinals, which losing to the Cardinals wasn't a horrible thing. Now, how they did was bad. That would have been a hard game no matter what. Whether you beat the Commanders, Arizona would have been hard, but then you got to beat the Patriots. And it wasn't that you got beat by the Patriots again. You got killed by the Patriots. Caleb Williams doesn't look good again.
The team is giving up.
Yeah. I mean, it's just dysfunction of the Bears. It's rinse and repeat. Ruin another quarterback. Doesn't matter who you get.
I don't know who they're going to get in the offseason. I mean, let's get into Bill Belichick. I know I texted you about him. And, previous to this year, I would have thought there'd be no way he'd go work in Dallas with Jerry Jones. But I almost wonder if Bill taking a year off, he's been doing the media stuff. Has he softened up a little bit? And he wants to get the all-time win record. He may not say that out loud, but obviously he wants to get another Super Bowl. But with Dallas, with Dak, he can win enough regular season games to get to that all-time win record.
Get the all-time wins, and then, if you can go 13-3, you got a good path. That's a good path to go to the Super Bowl. And then you get there, it's just a one game. He can win a Super Bowl with Dallas. They've got a piece. Now, Dak is – but Jerry Jones will spend money. He will give him what he needs. Now, Jerry's going to have to step back and let Bill do some things. Now, will Jerry do that? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure Jerry wants to win a Super Bowl as bad as anybody. Now, he doesn't know the right steps to do it, but he wants to. And can Jerry swallow some pride? And can Bill swallow? Can they both swallow a little bit of pride and work together? We'll see. That's really what it comes down to. They both have to swallow a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't know if they both could. I don't know if Jerry, something that really never gets brought up. Obviously, that him and Jimmy Johnson having the falling out gets brought up a lot.
Right.
But I think Jerry wants to win a Super Bowl now, kind of with him in charge. He wants to prove that he could do it, where he calls all the shots. And I don't know if he's willing to give that up exactly, even for a Bill Belichick. Because I told you I thought Bill's going to be the next Eagles head coach. I still think that's in play. But speaking of the Eagles, I got to give Sirianni credit. Ever since that incident, they haven't lost. Their schedule's been favorable. They do. There's a real chance that maybe they're a player in the NFC. For me to get back on the Sirianni train, I just have to see him not lose his team the game in the playoffs. I need to see a close playoff game where he doesn't do something dumb, time management. I don't have to see him get to another Super Bowl or even the NFC Championship game, but maybe that was a come to Jesus moment for him after that with the crowd. Like I said, I'm sure
somebody got to him and said, "Hey, knock it off," or something,
Yeah, and good for him if that took place and he realized, okay, I've got a really good opportunity here. I've got a great roster and a great organization. Time to get serious and stop with the silly stuff. And hey, credit to him if he did that. It looks like he has. So I just need to see him get it done in the playoffs. I know his second year he got to the Super Bowl, but that's when he had the coordinators there. So he's still got a little bit left to prove to me, but it seems like ever since that incident, things have changed there in Philly.
Let's say, is there any way Deion goes to Dallas?
I think there's a chance. He actually came out yesterday, I believe it was, on one of the shows, and he said he's going to do it privately, but he is going to determine where Shedeur and Travis Hunter both go. He's going to have a say in that. With his son, I have no problem. Eli did it. John Elway did it.
Yeah, with your own son, that's on you. I mean, and essentially, I don't know Travis Hunter's family situation. I have no idea. He might have the best two parents in the entire world, but Deion is definitely taking on the parent role of Travis Hunter. He's taken that on and he's accepted it, and he's really tried to do the best by him. And I truly believe he's trying to do the best by him.
Yeah, with Travis Hunter, I think it's more what it's going to be, a corner / receiver. He's not probably as worried about him going to a bad team, where his son, he doesn't want him going to Carolina or the Browns.
Right.
He'd probably be fine with him going to New York or something. I think with Travis, what it's going to be is if a team says, hey, we see you as a corner only, and we don't want you playing receiver, or vice versa, Deion and Travis Hunter both want him to play both ways as much as possible. So if there's a team picking 2, 3, 4 that says, hey, we see you as a corner only or receiver only, then I could see them being like, don't draft me or don't draft him.
Right.
Or, he's going to hold out or whatever he's going to do. So that'll be interesting too. But yeah, Deion to the Cowboys, I do think Jerry's going to have to consider it because Mike McCarthy's gone after this year.
Yeah, he has to be gone. I was listening to some guys talk this morning. There's 5 or 6. Obviously New Orleans fired their guy. Eberflus is gone. McCarthy's gone.
The Jets
are gone. He's gone.
Jaguars
are gone. The Panthers, essentially, they're always on a 1-year deal with their guy.
Yeah, it's his first year. He'll probably get at least 4 or 5 games in year 2.
Yeah. But you never know, and it's one of those with these. Is there a relationship there, or does the owner make a call? And a guy like Lincoln Riley, that maybe somebody's infatuated with him, kind of a Cliff Kingsbury-ish guy where and he necessarily wouldn't get fired by USC, but definitely working his way out. Kingsbury got fired by Texas Tech and then goes and gets the Cardinals job. That's unbelievable. That's following up to the best. But a guy like Lincoln Riley that, hey, he understands if he doesn't win next year, he's probably gone, but he parlays that into an NFL job this year, probably take it.
Lincoln's stock is really low right now. I don't know.
I agree.
At the moment, John Milcop did bring up a good name the other day. He feels like a lifetime college guy, but Kirby Smart.
Yep. Yeah, if he doesn't think it's – yeah, he's finding it a little bit harder in the SEC with Ole Miss and Tennessee being much better than they've been in the past. Of course, let's just say Kirby leaves. I would think those two guys would probably be up for that job, wouldn't they? Wouldn't Heupel and Lane be up for the Georgia job?
Well, Lane is probably the one that we're not mentioning that we should for the NFL.
Right.
His dad was an NFL lifer,
Yep.
one of the best defensive coordinators. Lane had a weird – that was near the end of the Al Davis area, which we've talked about before. Lane, actually, if he's not going to get the Florida job, which it sounds like Florida's not going to be open, that could change, of course. Lane Kiffin might be the one actually to pay attention to jumping back into the NFL.
And everybody's like, well, it didn't work in LA or it was still Oakland, I think, at the time. But I think he was 32 years old or whatever, never really been in the NFL too much, and he got offered the NFL job and took it, which we all would. You got offered a job you probably didn't deserve, you didn't earn, but hey, this is a pretty good job. You're one of 32 head coaches in the NFL. He wasn't ready. He's a much better coach now. I think that time he spent with Alabama, him getting his butt chewed, you could see it on the sideline, and he just took it. And, he's learned from his time. He got offered a lot of stuff and he had Tennessee and USC and the Raiders all real early in his career because of who his dad was, like you just talked about. But he's older now. One, you just get more mature and you're better at it. And then two, those experiences has helped him. And then him going to Florida Atlantic, being a head coach and winning at a lower place without all the resources. I mean, you think about his head coaching stops before Florida Atlantic were the Raiders, which obviously the NFL, you have every resource in the world, Tennessee and USC. Those places have all the resources in the world. Florida Atlantic does not. They're really good for their league in resources, but overall it's not. I kind of go back to even high school, people that have coached junior high basketball or junior high football and then work your way up to be a varsity coach, you know how hard it is. Instead of those people that come in and go be a head coach right away or a varsity assistant right away that don't have to do every little thing for a 14-year-old kid, 13-year-old kid that you got to just essentially take care of. The 17-year-old varsity player can take care of himself a lot more.
No, that's exactly right. And he definitely had a lot of growing up to do. He probably learned from all those experiences. If he did want to go to the NFL, I mean, you remember when he was with the Raiders, he wanted to draft Calvin Johnson, and ownership came in and said, no, we're taking Jamarcus Russell. And they had a big clash. It was public. So he probably knows what to look for. And given, who his dad knows and all that, good teams to consider, teams to just not even give a chance as far as ownership goes in the NFL. But Lane Kiffin might be the one actually that we should be paying attention to. And then, Deion's name's always going to be up. Cowboys, Florida State.
That maybe the Florida State's an interesting one. And this is where I heard this today as well, or this week. Indiana, you have to look at the Florida State situation, or a Mel Tucker situation, where you give these people, they have one good year, you give them a 10-year contract, all kinds of money, and then the ship sails quickly. Now, Mel Tucker was a little bit different situation at Michigan State. He got himself in trouble doing dumb things. But I don't think Mike Norvell's doing dumb things. He's just not winning. You go from undefeated to now you've won one football game, and he signed a 10-year contract extension last year. They can't afford to fire him. They're just like Florida. They keep signing these big contracts, and they can't afford to fire him for a few years. And if you're Indiana, obviously you want to pay him well, and you want to give him a good contract. But it was just be leery of giving him $10 million a year for 10 years because you just don't know. And if he's really that serious and leaving and going somewhere, you might just have to let him go.
Yeah, with Kurt Cinetti there at Indiana, I didn't realize he's already in his 60s. Mike
right.
Foster,
yeah, he's not a young guy.
No, he's not. I would have guessed like 56. I think he's 62 or 4. I looked the other day. I can't remember. So he's a little bit older and probably wise beyond his years.
But again, he doesn't have a whole lot of years left of coaching, just realistically. So he's going to want, and he should. Everybody should try to get whatever they can get. And if someone's going to offer him $10 million a year for 5 years, he should take it. He's not been in the positions to make that he hasn't made that his entire life. James Madison, he didn't make that. every other stop. Now and people forget this. He's one of those Saban guys too. He was at Alabama for a couple years earlier in his career. So he's got that same, he knows what it takes.
Yeah, he was there for the early years.
Right.
So that's an interesting one. But, the coaching carousel, Dion, Lane Kiffin, maybe Kirby Smart. But the more and more we talk about it, I think Lane Kiffin's the one that maybe a lot of people aren't talking about that could make that jump back to the NFL.
I wouldn't hate that in Chicago. I don't think.
Yeah, maybe that might be a good mix.
He can coach quarterbacks.
Yeah, definitely.
We need a quarterback. I mean, even if our head coach isn't the quarterback guy, it's okay. But you got to go get Cliff Kingsbury. I think you go get Cliff Kingsbury. You go get him. You go steal him from the commander.
If he wants to leave, that is. Yeah, but you're right though. Whoever the Bears go after or get, the most important thing is getting the quarterback right. I mean, if you could bring in a Bill Belichick and a Josh McDaniels, but what does Bill want to work for the Bears? I don't know. But if they don't get the quarterback right, then you're looking at another 3 to 5, 6 years of searching again, and then drafting the guy in the first round and fingers crossed and repeat and rinse and repeat over and over again.
Yeah, agreed. That makes me so mad. Like, I didn't like the other drafts, so the quarterbacks, like, it just wasn't. But this one I really liked, and I still think he's probably the best guy. Maybe, but he just got in a bad situation. And again, the Bears messed it up. They did it with Fields, where they drafted a guy, and John Fox was still the coach, and then they had 1 year with him, and then they fired their coach instead of clean, do it easy. This time you knew you had the number 1 pick. You're going to draft the quarterback. It was no secret. Should have fired him, and then it could have been a seamless. The coach and quarterback are together. If they work, you keep them. If they don't work, you get rid of them both. But it's a package deal. Now he's going to have to learn another system.
Yeah, he's going to have to learn some new stuff this year, and then next year when they bring in the new staff.
Yeah, he's going to be on his 3rd offensive coordinator in 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah, it's too bad that they couldn't have got Harbaugh, because if you would have had Harbaugh, I would be willing to bet a lot things would look a lot different, just like they are for San Diego. So
you're not the best team in the NFL yet, but you're getting better, and that's what the Chargers are. And you got a trajectory, and there's a plan, and it's not going to be the most exciting football in the world. That's not Jim Harbaugh's not going to do that. He won't, but he's won everywhere he's been.
Yeah, it's going to be running defense, smart passing. I think Herbert's got 11 touchdowns, 1 pick on the year. You and I talked. We didn't think he was going to have amazing stats per se, even though that's a good ratio. It's not a ton of touchdowns, but he's learning to play the game better, and things are looking really good for San Diego right now. And that division as a whole, by the way, because it looks like Bo Nix and Sean Payton, that's looking promising, even though they lost. Things are looking better in Denver now. The Raiders. Speaking of Shedeur Sanders, I'm not on Twitter anymore, but I hear he likes every time that the Raiders lose because he wants to go there, maybe.
Well, I get now I think they need to fire that coach too, and go get somebody else. But that's a whole nother thing, because I don't think he's the right guy either. He's one of the reasons Arizona State got in all kinds of trouble, is they're cheating down there with Herm Edwards and recruiting and all the NFL guys not doing things the right way. But that's what happens when you put an NFL staff in a college setting where there's the rules are just different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it works both ways. If you don't know the college rules or you don't know the NFL rules, it's a lot more to learn. Urban Meyer coming up said he talked to a bunch of people, and then he got in some trouble saying how he wanted to change things, and the NFL basically told him shut up. That's not the way it works. So it does work both ways. But someone brought this up today too. I mean, college football, all the schools only have 2 or 3 games left. So it's
3 weeks. Yeah.
Feels like we just started.
We got our thing that the game's November 30th against Kansas State, and we have to have our camper out of there. We were able to leave it there all year. Now we've taken it in and out a few times. Has to be out that December 1st, which is just the Sunday after the game, by 5:00. So, which is very understandable, but and it may have to go out before that because if we get snow or something, it's not. Now, we're very blessed that my dad has a truck that's big enough that we could pull it out of about anything. And it's not that big a camper. My dad's got pretty good sized trucks. So, but not everybody's in that situation. We saw campers and everything get stuck in mud, didn't we, Trev? That was
that's
Hinterland.
Hinterland. That's
Well, we had that same. Well, we had a different camper, but we had that same big black truck. So it's not going to get stuck, but a lot of them will.
No, and if you do happen to get stuck, there'll be enough people around to get you out of there.
Oh yeah, and by then it might be even a little frozen, so then that help as well. So all right, well we went plenty long tonight. Anything else you want to talk about? We kind of hit everything we needed. State of Iowa's a mess. The NFL, they're really just halfway through, correct, of the season because there's 18 weeks. Everybody's about not.
Yeah, I mean, given the bye weeks, yeah, pretty much. And there's some big games coming up. We got Pittsburgh, Baltimore this week, and the Chiefs and Bills. The Bengals are going on the road to Chargers. That's their season's kind of on the line. So there's some good games this week. I was just thinking of this. I saw some before we got started. The Mike Tyson fight is Friday on Netflix.
I'm going to try to watch that, I think, just because I'm intrigued. Yeah. I want Tyson
to
beat him up, but I don't think he will. I think he loses, but he's 58
I've
years
got
old.
no idea. Yeah, I've got no idea. I just remember when I was younger, my mom and brother and Friday night fights was a big deal in the Tyson area. That used to be big, in the boxing world. So I forgot that was getting close, but now I know. I was wondering what I was going to do Friday night, so I'll be watching that because I think if you have Netflix, I think it's a free stream on there.
It's just on Netflix, so and most people have that. So yeah, it's not the old HBO pay-per-view that used to. I remember going to a buddy's house and watching him when his first fight when he got out of prison. I think it was Peter McNeely or something, and it was a big night.
Yeah.
Obviously there's all the undercards and everything, and he comes out and McNeely gets hit once and he's out, or maybe twice. But first round, it was over. I mean, it was like, you got to be kidding me.
McNeely was showing him up too before the fight, and I think that one was like 30 seconds maybe.
Yeah, it was. I can't remember exactly, but it wasn't very long. I know that.
Yeah. So other than that, no, that's I guess that's the last thing I had, and we'll see what happens after this weekend. Hopefully, good news for Iowa State, but we got a few weeks left of it.
Yep, 3 weeks left, and then that, and just kind of, this is a topic for a different day, but I think conference championship games might be a little bit in trouble or irrelevant going forward, especially if they get to 16 or 24, because the season's going to take so much longer that's a game they're going to have to cut back on. And essentially, all those teams are going to get in the playoff if you get in the conference. And that almost needs maybe to be the rule, is the top two out of every conference go, and then at large after that, things like that. So.
Yeah, that might be something they'll have to consider, especially once they expand. But yeah, for this 12-team one, we'll see how it plays out. I'm hoping for chaos because that'll give us plenty of good things to talk about.
I mean, ultimately, I was talking with Kyle, guy I teach with today. We said, really, essentially, Iowa State and Iowa are out. I mean, Iowa State has a chance. I mean, there is a path there, but overall, let's just everybody lose. Let's just have utter and complete chaos, and then we'll figure it out.
Yep, utter just chaos and hopefully good games once the playoffs start.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Trev, and we'll be back again next week. Again, thanks everybody for listening, tuning in, and supporting us here at Morgan the Ask For podcast. That is Trevor Voss. I am Ryan Morgan, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Have a good night.